we discovered an issue in this component. Now, whenever you face issues like this, you should always try to isolate the problem. The better you isolate the problem, the faster you can find the cause and fix it. Let me show you what I mean. So back to our project, I'm going to create a new file called playground.html. Add a basic HTML template here. Now, we're going to go to index.html and copy all of our style sheets and add them to our playground. So we're going to take a break from index.html and study the troubling component in isolation. Okay. So here in the body element, we're going to add the bad boy, which is block domain. Let's copy this and paste it here. Good. Now we're going to open this file with live server. Great. So on wide screens, we don't have any issues. The issue only happens on a small screen. So we bring up Chrome DevTools and go to the responsive mode. Great. Now, here we have a section. Inside this section, we have a header. Then we have an input group, which is this part here, followed by a list of domain prices. Now we're going to isolate the problem. So I'm going to delete these elements one by one and see if the problem's still there. So I'm going to delete the header. Now, look, we still have the problem. Okay. Similarly, I'm going to delete the domain prices. Good. We still have the problem. Okay. So let me undock this window so we have more space. All right. Now we're going to go to the responsive mode. So we can drag this bar and see what is going on here. So currently the resolution is 844 by 582. Everything looks great. Let's make the viewport smaller and see what happens. So everything is fine until, all right, take a look. So at this breakpoint around 400, do you see that white box is now under the button? Let me go back. All right, look, everything looks fine now. But now as I make the viewport smaller, the white box starts traveling under the button. Look, there you go. And then it comes out. So this white box that we have is the container for an input and a button. The input is right here, but we cannot see it because it doesn't have any borders. So to see things clearly, I'm going to right click here and inspect this element. So here's our input. I'm going to give this a big border so we can see things clearly. Earlier in our style sheet, we set the border to 0. Temporarily, I'm going to set this to 5 pixels, solid red. Now, similarly, I'm going to apply a border to our input group. So in our style sheet, we set the border to 0. Now I'm going to set this to 5 pixels, solid black. Now we can see things very clearly. So what is happening is that our input box with the red border has grown larger than its parent. Now to verify that my assumption is correct, once again, I'm going to isolate the problem. So I'm going to delete the button and see if we still have the problem. So let's select this and delete it. Great. Look, we still have the problem. So something fishy is going on with either the input group or the input field. So here in Element Inspector, I'm going to select these elements and inspect their width. So the width of our input group is 261 pixels. Now look at the width of the input field. It's 278. That's why it has grown larger than its container. But here's the question. Where is the width coming from? Let's find out. So we go to the Computer tab. Down the bottom, we have the width property. Now look, this is grayed out because we haven't explicitly set this property. So this is automatically assigned by Chrome. Now let's look at the styles we apply to this element. So here on the Styles tab, look, if we have an input inside an input group, we have set the flex grow to 1. We said this earlier, so the input field grow and take up all the available space, and this would push the button to the right side of the input group. Now this is not the cause of the problem, because if we disable this property, we'll still have the problem, because Chrome has assigned a default width to our input field. We don't want that. So if we have an input inside an input group, I'm going to set its width to 0, and then let this property take care of growing the input field. So the input field will grow and take up all the available space. Now look, the problem is gone. Now, where have we implemented this style? In styles.css on line 296. So back to our style sheet, let's go to line 296. Here it is. I'm going to set the width to 0. save the changes, and then refresh the page. Okay, take a look. The problem is gone, great, but we have so much padding in the button, and as a result, we don't have enough space to type something here. So let's inspect this element. So here's the rule we defined for our buttons. Over here, we have set the horizontal padding to 3 rems. Now let me show you an alternative way. Instead of using a rem unit for horizontal padding or horizontal margin, we can use a percentage of the viewport width. So if we set this to, let's say, 4 VW, that means 4% of the width of the viewport. The wider the viewport, the more horizontal padding we're going to have. Now on a mobile device, we have less horizontal padding, so we have more space in our input field. Now let's enlarge the viewport and see what happens. Good. Everything looks good. So even on a wide screen, our button still looks good. Now, once again, you should always test this on various screen sizes. So let's zoom out and select a wide screen. So a large laptop with the resolution of 1440 pixels. Our button still looks good. What about a wider screen? The button looks a little bit stretched for my personal taste, but we can always write a media query for these screens and overwrite the horizontal padding. So back to the button section, here's the rule for our buttons. I'm going to change the horizontal padding to 4 VW. Now back to this window. The next problem we need to fix is the layout of domain prices. We're using a 3-column grid, and that's why these items look so squashed. Now back to our design mockup for mobile devices. Yes, here we have a 3-column grid, but look at the width of this page. It's just under 650 pixels. So the designer of this page assumed a really large mobile device, which is not that common. So this is one of those cases where we're going to move away from the original design mockup and refine our implementation so it looks great on various screen sizes. So let's inspect this element and see where we have defined the grid template. All right, here's our list of domain prices. Earlier, we set this property, grid template columns, and here we're using 3 columns. So we need to go to line 746 of our style sheet and make a tiny change. So line 746, and we're going to change the template columns to 2 columns. All right, that's much better. Now, the next thing we need to fix is the color of these labels. Earlier, we had the color in this rule, so the color was set to color headings. But then I told you that I made a mistake and we shouldn't have applied the color here, because the whole point of creating this rule was to remove the default styling from our lists. We didn't want to add something to it. We didn't want to change the default color. So we're going to apply this property to our list of domain prices. So once again, let's go to line 746. This is where we define the styles for the list of domains. So we're going to apply the color right here. Now, once again, as we learn more about this design, if we find other lists that have a similar look, then we're going to refactor our code and extract those properties and put them in a reusable component. That is object-oriented CSS. All right, our list looks much better. Now, let's see how it looks like on a wider screen. Okay, everything looks great. I'm pretty happy with this component. So now I'm going to pause the recording and add the remaining blocks to index.html. If I find any issues in any of these blocks, I'm going to study the issue in isolation, make the necessary changes, and then continue building the homepage. If you want to see my completed code, just download the zip file attached to this lesson.